The year is 1552, and Europe is holding its breath. The Ottoman Empire, the most powerful force on earth, is marching north. Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent has already conquered most of the Balkans. His armies have swept through kingdoms like a storm through wheat fields. Hungary, once proud and strong, is split and bleeding. Buda, the capital, has fallen. Pest is in ruins. The western part of the country clings desperately to the Habsburg Empire for protection. The eastern region pays tribute to the Ottomans just to survive. And in the middle, caught between empires, is a small fortress city called Eger. Nobody expects it to matter. Nobody expects it to last. But sometimes history doesn't care what anyone expects. Eger sits in the northern hills of Hungary, a modest castle overlooking rolling valleys and quiet villages. It's not Vienna. It's not Constantinople. It's just a frontier town with stone walls and a handful of towers. But it controls the roads leading north toward the mines of Upper Hungary and the heartlands beyond. If the Ottomans take Eger, the path to Vienna opens wide. If they take Eger, the last resistance in central Hungary collapses. And so, in the late summer of 1552, the Ottoman war machine turns its gaze toward this little castle on the hill. The Sultan doesn't come himself. He sends his best. Grand Vizier Kara Ahmed Pasha, a veteran commander with decades of siege experience. Ali Pasha, the Rumelian general who has crushed rebellions across the Balkans. Accounts vary, but somewhere between 40,000 and 80,000 soldiers march toward Eger. Janissaries in white caps and flowing robes. Sipahi cavalry with curved swords gleaming in the sun. Engineers dragging massive cannons through the mud. Supply trains stretching for miles. This is not a raid. This is annihilation. Inside the walls, Captain Istvan Dobó receives the reports. He's a soldier, not a diplomat. He's fought Ottomans before, survived ambushes and skirmishes along the border. But this is different. This is an ocean of steel and fire rolling toward his gates, and he has maybe 2,000 men. Not professional soldiers. Not trained pikemen or armored knights. He has Hungarian infantry, some Croatian and Czech mercenaries, a few hundred local militia. Men who know how to fight. Yes, but not an army. And then there are the women. The wives, the mothers, the daughters of Eger who refuse to leave. They know what happens when Ottoman armies take Christian cities. They've heard the stories from Buda, from Pest, from towns that no longer exist. So they stay. They pick up stones. They heat water. They prepare to fight. And Dobó, looking at his tiny garrison and the civilians who won't abandon their homes, makes a decision that will echo through centuries. He will not surrender. He will not retreat. He will hold. The Ottomans arrive in early September. The villagers outside the walls have already fled or been captured. The fields are empty. The roads are silent. And then the horizon darkens with banners. Red and green silk snapping in the wind. Crescent moons gleaming on flags that seem to stretch forever. The Ottoman army surrounds Eger like a noose tightening around a throat. They set up camp just out of cannon range. Tents spread across the valleys in every direction. Campfires flicker at night like a second sky of stars. And in the center of it all, the great siege guns. Massive bronze cannons, some weighing several tons, dragged across half of Europe for this moment. The engineers position them carefully, angling the barrels toward the walls. The message is clear. You are alone. You are outnumbered. You will fall. Kara Ahmed Pasha sends an emissary under a white flag. The message is simple and almost kind. Surrender now and you will live. The garrison can leave with their weapons. The civilians will not be harmed. The castle will be absorbed into the empire peacefully. It's a generous offer by the standards of the age. But Dobó doesn't even hesitate. He sends the emissary back with a single sentence. We will defend this fortress until the last stone falls and the last man stands. The Ottomans receive the answer in silence. Then the drums begin. The bombardment starts at dawn. The great cannons roar, shaking the earth, sending iron and stone balls hurtling through the air. The walls of Eger are not particularly thick. They were built to withstand raids, not a full siege by the most advanced artillery in the world. Stone explodes. Dust fills the air. Entire sections of the outer wall begin to crack and crumble. The noise is unbearable, a constant thunder that never stops. Men cover their ears and still feel their bones vibrate. But the defenders don't break. They pull back from the shattered sections. They pile rubble behind the breaches. They dig trenches inside the walls so that even if the Ottomans break through, they'll still have to fight for every inch. And the women work alongside them, carrying stones, filling baskets with earth, tearing up their dresses to make bandages. This is not a battle. This is survival. After days of bombardment, the Ottomans launched their first assault. Thousands of soldiers surge forward, ladders and ropes in hand, screaming battle cries that echo off the hills. They hit the walls like a wave crashing against a cliff. Ladders slam against stone. Men scramble upward, swords between their teeth. And the defenders meet them with everything they have. Muskets fire down into the packed ranks. Arrows whistle through the smoke. Stones, heated in fires until they glow red, are dropped onto the attackers. Men scream as the burning rocks shatter bones and ignite clothing. Boiling water, oil, anything that can maim or kill, rains down from the battlements. And still the Ottomans come. They reach the top of the walls. Hand-to-hand fighting erupts along the parapets. Swords clash. Men grapple and fall. Blood runs down the stone like rain. But every time the Ottomans establish a foothold, the defenders throw them back. Dobó is everywhere, shouting orders, pulling wounded men to safety, grabbing a pike and fighting beside his soldiers. The women reload muskets, pass ammunition, drag the injured away from the fighting. There is no front line. There is no rear. There is only the wall and the desperate struggle to hold it. The first assault fails. The Ottomans retreat, leaving hundreds of dead and wounded at the base of the walls. But they'll be back. They always come back. And inside the castle, the defenders count their losses. Dozens dead, more wounded, ammunition running low, food supplies dwindling. But morale somehow holds. Because they've done the impossible. They've thrown back the greatest army in the world. Once, the siege drags on. Days turn into weeks. The Ottomans try different tactics. They dig tunnels under the walls, packing them with gunpowder to collapse entire sections. But the defenders dig counter tunnels, breaking into the Ottoman shafts and fighting underground in the darkness. They set fires. They flood the tunnels. They collapse them before the Ottomans can detonate their charges. It's brutal, claustrophobic warfare. Men stabbing at shadows. The smell of earth and blood and fear. But the walls hold. The Ottomans build siege towers, massive wooden structures on wheels, designed to roll up to the walls and allow soldiers to storm over the top. But the defenders target them with fire arrows and cannons. One by one, the towers go up in flames, burning like funeral pyres against the night sky. The screams of men trapped inside are something the survivors will never forget. But the walls hold. The Ottomans try starvation. They cut off every supply route. Nothing gets in. Nothing gets out. Inside Eger, rations are reduced. Then reduced again. People are eating leather, boiling bones for broth. Children cry from hunger. The wounded suffer without medicine. But no one talks about surrender. Because they know what surrender means. And so they endure. They tighten their belts. They share what little they have. They tell stories to keep their spirits up, sing songs to drown out the cannon fire. They hold. October comes. The weather turns cold. Rain falls in sheets, turning the Ottoman camps into seas of mud. Disease begins to spread among the besiegers. Dysentery, fever, the kind of sicknesses that kill more soldiers than any sword. Supply lines stretch thin. The Ottomans are far from home, deep in hostile territory, and winter is coming. But still they attack. Again and again. Waves of soldiers throwing themselves at the walls, dying by the hundreds, and still they come. Because pride is at stake now. Because the Sultan's reputation hangs on this little castle in the middle of nowhere. Because admitting defeat to 2,000 Hungarians is unthinkable. But inside the walls, something extraordinary is happening. The defenders are not just surviving. They're adapting. They're innovating. They build makeshift weapons. They rig traps along the breaches. They coordinate attacks, sallying out from hidden gates to strike at Ottoman positions and then vanishing back inside before reinforcements arrive. They use the terrain, the narrow approaches, every advantage they can find. And the women, the civilians, become an integral part of the defense. They're not just supporting the soldiers. They're fighting, throwing stones, pouring boiling water, standing shoulder to shoulder with the men when the Ottomans reach the walls. History doesn't record all their names, but their presence is undeniable. This is not a garrison defending a castle. This is a community refusing to die. By late October, the Ottomans are exhausted. They've lost thousands of men. Their supplies are nearly gone. Winter is closing in, and the roads back to Ottoman territory will soon be impassable. Kara Ahmed Pasha calls a council. Some of his commanders want to continue. They've invested too much blood to walk away now. But others see the reality. They're not going to take Eger. Not before winter. Not without losing half the army. And so, in early November, after more than a month of siege, the Ottomans begin to withdraw. They spike their cannons so the defenders can't use them. They burn their siege equipment. And then, slowly, the great army that came to crush Eger marches away. Not in triumph. In silence. In defeat. From the walls, the defenders watch them go. They're too tired to cheer. Too hungry to celebrate. They just stand there, covered in blood and ash and dirt, watching the horizon empty. And then, slowly, the reality sinks in. They've won. 2,000 soldiers and a few hundred civilians have held off an empire. They've stopped the unstoppable. They've done something no one thought possible. And the world will remember. The siege of Eger becomes a legend almost immediately. Across Europe, the news spreads like wildfire. A tiny Hungarian garrison has defeated the Ottomans. The empire that took Constantinople, that conquered the Balkans, that threatened Vienna itself, has been stopped by a handful of defenders on a hill. It's a propaganda victory of immense proportions. It proves that the Ottomans can be beaten, that resistance is possible, that faith and courage and desperation can hold back even the greatest armies. The Pope celebrates. The Habsburgs breathe easier. And in Hungary, Eger becomes a symbol, a rallying cry, a reminder that even when everything seems lost, even when the odds are impossible, there is still hope. Istvan Dobó becomes a national hero. His name is etched into Hungarian history alongside kings and saints. But he deflects the praise. He talks about his soldiers, about the women who fought beside them, about the civilians who refused to run. He knows the truth. This wasn't one man's victory. This was a community's triumph. And when historians later try to explain how it happened, they struggle. Because on paper, Eger should have fallen in days. The Ottomans had more men, more guns, more resources, more experience. But numbers don't account for will. Logistics don't measure courage. And strategy can't predict the moment when ordinary people decide they will not be conquered. The Ottoman Empire doesn't collapse because of Eger. They'll remain a dominant power for another century. But the aura of invincibility is cracked. Other cities, other fortresses, will look at Eger and think maybe we can hold too. Maybe we can resist. And that shift in perception, that flicker of hope, changes the balance of power in Central Europe. The Habsburgs consolidate their holdings. The Ottomans, stung by the failure, become more cautious in their northern campaigns. And Hungary, though still divided and occupied, holds on to a piece of its soul. Because Eger didn't fall. There are no perfect endings in history. Many of the defenders die in the years that follow, in other battles, other sieges. The women who fought on the walls return to lives that history barely records. The castle itself is eventually taken by the Ottomans decades later in a different siege, with a different garrison, under different circumstances. But the siege of 1552 remains untarnished. It remains the moment when 2,000 souls looked at an empire and said no. Not today. Not here. Not ever. And perhaps that's the real lesson of Eger. Not that the small always defeat the large, or that courage always wins, or that miracles happen to those who believe hard enough. The lesson is simpler and harder. That sometimes, when everything is on the line, when the choice is between submission and annihilation, ordinary people can do extraordinary things. They can hold walls that should crumble. They can fight battles they should lose. They can stand when every logical voice tells them to run. Not because they're heroes in some mythical sense, but because in that moment, on those walls, they become something more than themselves. They become a community, a family, a people who refuse to let their home be erased without a fight. The soldier who wrote that letter, the one found in the mud with the words, "I did not run," barely visible, was 23 years old. His name is lost to time. We don't know if he was Hungarian or Croatian or Czech. We don't know if he survived the siege or fell in the first assault. But we know he was there. We know he fought. And we know that because of him and 2,000 others like him, a city stood. An empire was stopped. And history changed course on a hill in northern Hungary. That's not ancient history. That's not some dusty tale from a forgotten book. That's the story of what human beings can do when they decide that some things are worth more than survival. Some things are worth dying for. And some walls, no matter how battered and broken, will never fall as long as there are people willing to stand on them. Eger still stands today. The castle is a museum now. Tourists walk the walls where soldiers bled. They take pictures of the towers where women poured boiling water on invaders. They read plaques about the siege and nod appreciatively and move on. But if you stand there quietly, if you close your eyes and listen, you can almost hear it. The drums, the cannons, the voices shouting defiance into the smoke. You can almost feel the weight of that letter in your hand, the one that never made it home, the one that tells you everything you need to know about courage and sacrifice and love. They stood, they fought, they won, and we remember, not because it's easy, but because forgetting would be the real defeat.